For starters, how do you define leadership and what makes a good leader?
Okay, so Tom and I have had many off-the-cuff type of conversations, so I'm just going to continue that informality. So I try to simplify concepts. Like, there's a lot of nonsense out there on leadership, and you're like, your eyes glaze over when you read this. You know, you're like, really? So I try to talk about concepts that we can operationalize. So I narrowed down leadership to one word: influence. Because if you think about the reason why you're a leader, no matter what you want to do, sell, persuade, get buy-in to, if you don't have influence over the people that you're leading, you can't do anything. So I think of leadership as influence. So then that begs the next question. Well, how do you create influence? And you create influence the way I look at it, and as a psychologist, the work I do with businesses as a relationship expert, to me, everything is about relationships, right? And we want to do business with people that we know, like, and trust. That will never change. It's empathy, right? So to be able to share and understand what somebody's feeling, even if you yourself haven't experienced it. And the reason why you need to create empathy in your relationships, and it has to be genuine and authentic, is because it creates a connection. And without a connection, you can't influence, and if you can't influence, you can't lead.
Okay, so here's the problem that I see. Leaders inherently have like this crossroad that they're facing, where you could be thrust into leadership. And there's sort of this old Greco-Roman idea of the farmer who they elevate to be the general who leads the people. And he says, I just want to go back to my farm. I just want to go back to my farm, and don't make me lead. But if you do, you know, I'll invade 7 countries and we'll have success. But then I'm going to go back to my farm, and I never really wanted to do this in the first place. I question whether or not that really exists, because as I've met a lot of great leaders throughout the years, they're very driven. And they're people who looked at a country or a company, or they had some industry and said, who should run this? This person. This person should run this. Now, that person does not sound to me to be a natural candidate for empathy. So can empathy be can anyone have empathy?
Okay.
And is there a challenge naturally with people wanting to be in charge and then being able to truly see the world through other people's eyes?
Okay, so let me back up a little bit before I answer your question. Don't confuse somebody that has the title of a leader as being a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just because somebody calls themselves a leader, or just because somebody's the president or the CEO, that doesn't necessarily mean that they, in fact, operate as a leader. They might operate dictatorially. They might operate with an iron fist. But don't confuse, forcing somebody to do something, giving a mandate, is not the same as influencing with empathy. So let's start that way. In terms of when somebody starts a company, most leaders, if they're true to the term, will be able to take the concept to birth. They will conceive of it. Many people realize that to develop it and to have it grow to the next level, it's not their skill set. They might be the visionary, but they're not going to grow it. So many people, many entrepreneurs will get a business to a point and then step back. Or if they don't step back, somebody might tap them on the shoulder and say, you're not really working within your sweet spot. So let's be clear on that, right? In terms of can anybody develop empathy, absolutely 1,000% unequivocally so. Just like anybody can be a leader. The issue is some people are more innate in their ability to lead, in their ability to be empathic. Some people are raised in a way where it hones that skill. But even if you innately are a leader, and if you innately can be empathic, you still need to develop it to get better at it.
So let's go in that direction for a moment. So let's go into what empathy is, what empathy isn't, and can you kind of give us a modeling of a good example of empathy in action?
So empathy is if, let me give it by an example, right? Because it's so much easier. Let's say your dog died and you are distraught. And let's say, I don't really like dogs. By the way, I love dogs. But let's say,
And my dog did die.
okay.
Thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate it. This is the format I really wanted to
So
talk
go
about.
for the K. So an empathic person, even if they never had a dog, even if they don't like dogs, right? They would be able to connect with you on an emotional, visceral way and feel your pain without themselves having experienced it. So, Tom, I can feel, I can see this is so difficult for you.
It was.
Even though I've never experienced it, I can only imagine what you're going through.
Right.
So do you
And
feel
that's
connected?
real. And I do feel that. And I know you well enough that I can tell as you say that. You
Right,
do
and that's the whole thing. When it's empathic, it's real. People know it, right? We're fooled. I used to say 90-10. We'll say 80-20. I don't know if I got dumber or smarter that people are fooling me more than I thought they were when I was younger. But you can feel authenticity. You can feel when somebody's full of baloney.
Yeah.
And because here's the problem. Everybody's so into cognitive, so into logic, right? The prefrontal cortex. Leadership is about the heart. And only within the last 150 years, say the AMA, do we even talk about mind and body. Really, true leadership is the connection. So what we think is what we feel, and what we feel is what we think. So if you and I are talking, and you just get this feeling like, I'm sort of kind of done, like time to go, there's something that I'm not resonating, we're not resonating. And many times it's not what I'm saying to you. It might sound smart, it might make sense logically, but emotionally, I'm just not trusting this, right? So empathy is built on trust.
So there's a school of thought and leadership where you shouldn't get too close to the people that you're leading. But doesn't true empathy contradict naturally that school of thought?
Okay, so I'm sort of kind of chuckling, Tom, because you're way too old to know that school of thought. I mean, you're way too young to know that school of thought of leadership. That was...
Well, I shaved my head, so you can't really tell what age I am.
Here's the thing. When you're a leader, you want to be able to be empathic to your people as people.
Uh-huh.
You can still feel, I can give you an example. I'll give you an example of this. So I was working with the CEO, and this CFO had to go. It just wasn't working out. And I talked to the CEO a lot about it, and he was getting ready to let him go. It was November. His wife suddenly died. I said, there's a special place in hell for a CEO that fires an employee 2 weeks after his wife dies. Let's wait. So they waited. 6 months, whatever it was. It was not a make or break thing. It just wasn't helping to move the company forward. That's empathic leadership. The leader still had to do what was in the best interest of the company and the business. But he could still do it with empathy, coming from a place of genuinely caring about somebody. The business was not going to make or break anything they were doing if this guy held on for 6 more months. But as a person, like, can you hear about corporations, Christmas Eve, they're firing people. Really? Like, come on, that's no empathy. So you still need to connect and want to feel for your people, but you can't let that cloud your business decisions. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. So our last speaker was Dave Neeleman, founder of JetBlue, and he's got a couple of different airlines. And so he's giving us 2 different perspectives here that I'd love to have you analyze. The first one is he talks about servant leadership, which I think could also be called empathetic leadership, in a sense.
Well, I would call it leadership.
Yeah. And then he talked about this problem with Azul in Brazil. A few of you were there, where they really had a concern with safety with airplanes in Brazil. And he came up with a very strict guideline, hired the most famous pilot in Brazil, and then when this person predictably opposed something that Neeleman was trying to do, he then publicly fired him and did it in a way to sort of give a mandate to the entire safety program. And I think that's an interesting example of leadership entails difficult things, and sometimes not the nicest things in the world. Can you be both? Is it possible to be an empathetic leader and still make, not firing somebody after their wife is diagnosed or dies of cancer, but to do very difficult things and still be an empathetic and servant styled leader?
Quite frankly, they're not either or. It is leadership. You have to make the difficult decisions. You can, let's make it less extreme. Something that's every day, happens once a quarter. We have to make a decision in which direction we're going to go to. So you want to hear everybody's opinion. You genuinely want to hear. Of course, you go last, right? You never give your opinion first. And then you make a decision. You make the leadership decision, and you go forward. What you then do is, if I didn't take your opinion, I would go up to you later on privately and say, or even in public, Tom, I really appreciated what you shared. I decided to go in a different direction. But in the future, I want you to know that I want to hear your opinion because I respect it, even though I didn't take your opinion with this decision. So you're still making the difficult decision, and you're not emasculating the people whose opinion you went against. And mature people should be able to get that. And that's what a leader does too, is it filters down. Listen, we thought we were going in this direction. Leadership said, top leadership, we're going in another direction. Let's get on board. That's what they do in the military. That's how you win wars.
Yes, so that's great. So the world is changing, and we talked about Neutron Jack, and would you Chainsaw Al?
Chainsaw Al.
These are
Al Dunlap, I think was his
Al
last
Dunlap.
name.
These CEOs who were known for being pretty brutal and pretty harsh in decisions and their management styles. What changes in the world today would you point out that from your expertise and your background, you think leadership styles need to adjust?
Well, business is still about the bottom line, right? That's what you're in business for, to make money. And you enrich other people's lives. I think on the negative side, leadership has enriched leadership's lives and not necessarily the people that are working so hard to do well for them. I think we've gone off the rails to one extreme. On the other extreme, I think everybody thinks that their opinion is the right opinion and the only opinion, and that's a little scary as well, right? And we see that with millennials, and I'm not going to bet there's a lot of negatives about them, but there's also a lot of positives, right? Like, we're not going to work our whole lives and then die. But I think the difference today is a couple of things, and this is an overused term, but the concept of, work-life balance, right? It's not just, work like a dog, go home, have half an hour, get up, work again, or you don't stop working, right? Because you're texting, you're emailing. But I think it's the concept that it's about people first. And I think it's Southwest Airlines that says, and I know they've been in the news for some negative stuff lately, but if in business, if you take care of your people will take care of business. And just think about it. Think about how many people you know that will say, well, I will never go the extra mile for these people because they'll never go the extra mile for me. So when people know that the company cares about them, that shows up for them, COVID's a great example, right? And this is where, and I'm very much into empowering women, and I'm not into the men versus women. I absolutely love men. I adore my husband. 3 of my 4 children are young men. But COVID has failed women. Honestly, when I was raising my 4 kids, if we had COVID, somebody would have died and it wouldn't have been me. I mean, how could I have done that? I'm being totally honest, right? I mean, you're in the bathroom, like on the phone, like, no, that's just construction outside when your kids are screaming. The companies that have stepped up and supported women and families, those people will be loyal to the nth degree because they put their people first. And the companies that didn't, you're seeing, what's the term? The big exit? With people are leaving companies in droves because, well, you didn't take care of me, adios.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
It does. One thing that we've talked about, and one of the fun things that we've done in preparation for this interview is we've kind of gone at it a few hours at a time and opening up different topics and going back and forth and we
Feels like a setup.
Remember when you said this? No. One of the changes in our world today is that mental health is talked about enough to the point where it's the design of opening it up is so it removes the stigma, and suicide is a serious issue, and with violence and mental health behind violent acts. But interestingly, for this discussion, again, Joe Polish, who thank you for letting us use your office, Joe. Joe is our host today. Joe talks a lot about the nexus between addiction and entrepreneurs. And I think we can take that to the next level and say, okay, yeah, entrepreneurial behavior and addictive behavior can come from the same place, but so does attention deficit, depression. A lot of entrepreneurs wrestle with ADD and dyslexia. So let's go down that rabbit hole for a minute. With regards to leaders and entrepreneurs, how best to look at these things for yourself and understanding the people that we lead and how understanding these things better can make us better leaders.
Okay, so I'm not going to call it a rabbit hole. I'm going to call it a tunnel because I want light at the end of the tunnel.
I like
There's
it.
no value in just keep digging that grave, right? Okay, so here's how I look at any kind of thing that's a struggle or a challenge, right? So every single person that works with you, every single person that you meet has a challenge. And most people don't know what the challenge is that the other person that they're talking to is dealing with. But rest assured, everybody is struggling with something. My frame of reference is, since we all have challenges, we have a choice. Do we let the challenge define us, or do we use it and find a way to make lemonade out of lemons? So for the entrepreneur with ADHD, right, they have all of this energy, and if you look at it as flitzing around, and then they'll find one thing that really grabs their attention and they'll dive into it. That's a great strength. Every liability has a strength to it, right? Every positive has a negative. You talk to anyone that's achieved anything great in life, usually their greatest breakthrough came after a horrible, horrible failure, where at the moment they thought this is the end of the world, but you persevere, right? That's the grit. So for a leader that has ADHD, they can look at different things on a surface level. And what they can do is they can see patterns that other people can't see. Now, where does genius come from? Recognizing patterns that nobody else sees. Jack mentioned Elon Musk earlier. I'm not a fan of stars or anything, but I love Elon Musk because, first of all, he sticks it to all the people that short him every time. So tell Elon Musk he can't do something, he'll just show you. So he doesn't need the applause of the crowd. But what he can do is he can see things. He has a vision that nobody else can see. That's what entrepreneurs do. That's what ADHD does.
And he has Asperger's.
Right. He's on the spectrum.
And
Correct.
he's very open about it.
Correct.
So every time he was on Saturday Night Live talking about his Asperger's,
Yeah.
and I thought every person that has Asperger's is probably watching
Game on.
this, thinking validation.
Right. And he said what I always say: nobody mainstream, nobody normal has ever changed the world.
Right.
It's someone that can think outside, not only think outside the box, they don't even know there's a box.
Right.
So people with learning disabilities that learn differently than everybody else. Okay, I think the biggest challenge is getting the correct diagnosis. But then once you know what you have, you're like, okay, so this is my tool, this is my liability. How do I turn that into a strength? For example,
Yes.
believe it or not, I used to play basketball. I know I'm tiny.
I'm guessing a lot of elbows.
No, you know what I did? Long before Stephen Curry, I had a great outside shot. I never saw the inside of a key, right? I wasn't kidding myself. One time I could get away with dribbling between their legs, but that only worked once. So what did I do? I took that liability and I made it a strength. And I had a great outside shot. I was actually a much better swimmer. So if you know swimming, I was a butterflyer. Look at me. I mean, really? I don't know what I was thinking. Well, I was too dumb to know that butterflies are like your size. So what did I do?
What's that supposed to mean?
Big, big. So what did I do? I had the best form I could have because I didn't have any innate gift. Really not too smart when you think about it.
Right.
But so it all depends upon how you frame what you have.
That's great.
Right? So I don't like I would tell my children, stop cry me a river. Everybody has something they have to overcome. Give me the challenge. Give me the challenge.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Abe Lincoln. We talked about this. One of the best books ever, A Team of Rivals.
Mm-hmm.
Abe Lincoln was a country bumpkin. He defied all the odds. Why? He was able to empathy. Back to empathy.
But
Unique ability, knowing people's strengths and working them like a chessboard.
Yes.
Not checkers.
Yes.
A chessboard. Each piece moves differently, and each move is predicated upon anticipating what the other moves can be. That's how leaders run their company.
Does someone who wrestles with depression almost have a superhuman ability to be more empathetic?
Why would you ask that?
Well, because it's personally, in my family, there's a lot of issues with depression. And one of the things that I've found that comes out of that is once you look outwards, you're able to feel in a way that you otherwise couldn't.
Well, depression is, and I think I've said this to you before, everything's energy, right? And I'm not a woo-woo person at all. Like, I'm a neuroscience, so I'm not going to be sitting here telling, but it's all energy, right? So depression is energy turned inward, right? When you can free up that energy, you use that energy and you can feel, because it is all energy, other people's feelings.
Right.
So I can feel your struggle. It might not just be your depression. We all can do this. Here's a great example. I love to use this example. When you go out to dinner with your partner, right? Look at the couples. You're like, oh, those two are going home to have sex. Those two are having a fight. Those two aren't married to each other. You're all picking up on energy.
What about anxiety? And you've said something before, that anxiety is actually this
Rocket fuel?
amazing rocket fuel. How does somebody turn anxiety that's turned inward into rocket fuel?
Well, that's the ADHD, right? First, so again, you have to be able to what?
Oh, no, I was just making sure we're doing okay.
You have to be able. Okay, it all goes back to emotional intelligence too. Am I going all over the place?
Nope.
You following this? Okay.
This is great.
Self-awareness, right? So if you are anxious, if you are depressed, you have to be aware of it. Then what do you do with it? So take that energy and channel it, and then you can become creative.